Translation, a weekly-ish exploration of one fellow's translation of the Christian scriptures, one half chapter at a time. I'm Brandon Rhodes, and across the internet from me is the translator himself, Brandon Johnson. Hi, Brandon.
Hey, Brandon.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah. And good and a little sad to see the end of Ephesians.
Yeah, but it's been fun.
Yeah.
I feel like especially these last few ones here have been, I've had fun.
Yeah, this book has built and built and built. It was, for a few years now, Ephesians has been my favorite of the Pauline literature.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always like 1, 2, and 3. Those, and then 4, 5, and 6 were kind of like, it gets gross enough at times that I just didn't know what to. It's like, well, there's enough power in 1 through 3 that it still gets to be my favorite. So I've been thrilled to find not just more fun things at the beginning where I already liked it, but really fleshing out and animating some of the. It's like it all feels like more of a cohesive whole to me now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Like, that's part of what we've been doing is trying to like see how it all fits together. And how taking it as like discrete little chunks that have nothing to do with each other makes it like kind of like what your experience sounds like was that it makes it irrelevant, really.
Yeah, it was like 1 through 3 is like the cosmic story getting a little bit more local. But then like 4, 5, and 6 were like, and now here are some rules. And they felt like non sequiturs. Apart from the few of them that are particularly like, that seems to be perpetuating a structure of domination. To see how it actually, there is continuity and flow here. Yeah, I'm grateful. So everybody listening we are listening. We are going to be talking about the last few verses in Ephesians. What is it? 11 through the end. And I'm not even going to list out everything we're going to be looking at. I'll say that we're going to put a lot of time into verse 12. So we're going to do that thing on the screen again where we compare it to the ESV. And so if you want to spend some time focusing on anything, give some time to reviewing Ephesians 6, verse 12. So yeah, you can find the link to the translation in the show notes, and we'll have it up on the screen here momentarily. So yeah, check that out. Don't miss the footnotes either. We'll be back. Everybody, welcome back. Brandon, I'd love to start with you just reading through the entire stretch.
Yeah, maybe taking the paragraph. The end of it is like kind of like, say hi to so and so for me. So
yeah,
not as much
Peace.
Fun translation things in there.
Yeah.
Finally, be strengthened by the Lord and with his intense strength. Put on the battle gear associated with God in order to be able to withstand against the false accuser's schemes, because our battle is not against blood and body, but against the leaders, against the authorities, against the conquerors of the world system, who are characterized by darkness, and against the things that are associated with the oppressive spirit breath in the highest heavens. Because of this, wear the battle gear associated with God, so that you can be able to stand up to them on the day of oppression, having accomplished everything necessary to take your stand. Therefore, take your stand while binding your waist with truth, and putting on the breastplate justice, and while binding readiness produced by the triumphant message of peace under your feet, and while wearing with all of it the shield, faithfulness, with which you will be able to extinguish all the flaming arrows of oppression. Taking your hand the helmet, liberation, and the short sword, the life breath, which comes from the mouth of God. Do so with every prayer and wholehearted request, praying in every moment with the life breath, and give it attention with persistence and a wholehearted request about all the sacred ones. And on my behalf, that what to say may be given to me when I open my mouth, along with courage to speak and make known the mystery of the triumphant message, which is why I am an ambassador in chains, that I may have courage to speak as it is necessary to speak about it.
Yeah. And then the rest is say hi.
Yep.
Great. I don't think we've talked about the devil much
Not for a
in
while.
Ephesians.
We did early in Matthew, but not a lot. I don't think at all yet in Ephesians.
Yeah, let's talk about the old scratch.
Yeah, verse 11 there.
Yeah, you've got it as false accuser.
Which is what the word diabolon means. It's slanderer, false accuser. So it's throwing an accusation against someone, claiming something negative about them, but specifically that's not true, or at least that twists the truth. And so it's not just accuser, but false accuser. And that really is the role that we see. Like in Matthew, it was really clear, like kind of introduced in chapter 4, the adversary, the false accuser, and then showed throughout Matthew how the lead priests and the Pharisees were filling that role against Jesus, being the false accuser against Jesus. And then this here is kind of broadening it to the church. What ends up being the false accuser within and against the church? And you can take this as like a conscious entity, but it also doesn't have to be.
Right.
Could be a way of kind of personifying a way of being, an aspect of our reality, of society, of culture, of how people interact with each other that uses shame as a weapon.
Because there is a diversity of opinion about the nature of the false accuser. Like, is there an actual being? Is it sentient? What is it? Ancient, like gibberish? Is it psychological? Like, what's going on here? There's plenty of reasonable hypotheses that have a home in the tradition. But that like the language you used of like the way it's sort of this animating thing that comes out of us, like that language of a spirit being coming out of our mouths, like, well, that shows up further down in this passage of the spirit of the divine,
right?
Which we within Christianity, there's not much debate over whether or not that one exists,
right?
So we can speak of, we at least, what am I looking for here? That's I guess that's the salient point of it, really, is that apart from whether or not it exists, it's a way of describing, like the accuser, the false accuser, and the spirit are good adjectives or adverbs, I suppose, for the nature of how we speak.
And it kind of doesn't make any difference, practically speaking, whether it's a distinct entity, a being somewhere, or if it's a way of describing more of a phenomenon within humanity. The impact on people is the same, and our response, whether allying with that power or allying with Christ against that power is the same either way.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
yeah. And there are all kinds of fun metaphysical speculations of trying to explore, like, what is the nature of the false accuser or the authorities and worldly systems, the principalities and powers? Do they live, are they in a sense created by our own antagonism, or do they then have a celestial nature that kind of is, it's like an emergent principle of reality where the sum is greater than the parts, or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts? That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some good Gestalt thought there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's,
you're usually the one throwing out terms like that. So I just wanted to join in the fun. Yeah.
Dropping the German. So good. Yeah. Anything else we want to acknowledge here?
I mean, it feels like one, like, I just want to emphasize, like, I'm not trying to lean on either particular way here by this translation. That's what the word diabolon means.
Yeah.
It's,
you're not trying to dilute whether or not the devil exists. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Devil is just kind of taking the Greek letters through Latin into English,
as one does.
Diabolon to devil, just without translating it, really.
Yeah.
And I just think it should be translated because it means something important. And I capitalize it here to make it like, to show like, okay, this is talking about something very particular,
yes,
that could be a being, could be more of a phenomenon. But here it is. Yeah.
And if you, to get a bit historically speculative here, if a religion is increasingly aligned with the interests of the principalities and powers as they are going through, let's say, part of a continent and saying, convert to our culture / religion or perish. If you're using the language, if you're persistently making translation decisions that emphasize the existence of sentient celestial hostilities, devils and bad spirits and all that, it's easy to point at whatever their indigenous traditions are and locate those demons and the devil there instead of, and so it's like the demons are just any other religion than us.
Right.
And there may be that certainly sounds like a false accusation, especially when you read several other passages in scripture where it's clear the divine has a particular commitment to Israel that evolves strangely with Christianity. But like, he's like, I'm working with everybody here. So like we're actually taking a tool off of the belt of oppression that is used to harm.
Yeah. Having it more abstract allows it to be used however you want it to, really. Yeah.
And less inclined. It's like, well, what is the nature of the devil? Well, the nature of the devil is any other religion. It's like, well, actually the word devil comes from diabolon, which just means false accuser. So we should trust that Paul meant what the word he chose here. And the early church favored that word to describe an animating energy that Christ has overcome and that we persistently enact that victory over in our lives together.
Right. Yeah.
Not
the energy
out there.
that weaponizes shame, that weaponizes fear, to increase hostility rather than break it down.
Yep. Well, I think that leads us up to the precipice of verse 12. So bear with us. Let's get that side by side on the screen. If I'm worth my salt, there'll also be a link to this image in the show notes. Give me a second. All right. I love this tool of having these set in parallel. I'd like to read this in parallel. So how about I read a stretch and then you read the equivalent in your translation. So I'll be the bad cop here.
The extra sexist version.
The extra sexist version. That's me.
I mean, you said it. Yeah.
Like strike it from the record. All right. So for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood.
Because our battle is not against blood and body,
but against the rulers, against the authorities,
but against the leaders, against the authorities,
against the cosmic powers over this present darkness,
against the conquerors of the world system who are characterized by this darkness,
and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places,
and against the things that are associated with the oppressive spirit breath in the highest heavens.
I love it.
There's some differences.
There are
some similarities.
Yeah, I think the first big one, I want to just say I like blood and body instead of flesh and blood. That's alliteration is awesome. I'm affectionate towards all of it. So conquerors of the world system instead of cosmic powers. What's wrong with cosmic powers? That's kind of a cool Sauron.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great fantasy novel title.
Starting off strong. The devil probably doesn't exist, and this is fantasy talk. Okay, keep going.
I mean, okay, so in other places, we've tried to emphasize like the Greek cosmos is like world system. And like in John, it starts getting used as like the whole world, meaning all the people everywhere, you know. But there's a huge sense in which cosmos was used kind of as talking about the empire, talking about the Roman Empire, without saying empire so that no one murders us.
Like there's a bit of code switching here. Like we're just...
Right. So it's the world system, the way things work, the status quo of how society functions within the context of empire and the pyramid games that people play that we've talked about.
Which flows really appropriately out of like, but against the leaders, against the authorities. And in case I'm not spelling it out, it's not just the individuals or their offices, it's the whole GD system.
Right. And that's how we've been understanding cosmos. Is that whole system. And ESV and a lot of others, it's not just that translation, takes cosmos to mean world as in like physical reality, as opposed to after we die being in a disembodied existence in the ether with God in heaven somewhere. And so we're not of this physical reality where you can touch things around you. We're of the spirit world after we die, which I'm not going to go into it too much, but we've talked about how unbiblical that actually is. It's counter to everything the Bible is about. But then here, they're translating cosmic. Is that cosmos? Is world. So which is it? That it's this like physical reality as opposed to a spiritual reality on the other side of death? Or is it the other way around? Because you just literally used it in the exact opposite way that you've been translating it this whole time, ESV.
I mean, no, it doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. In terms of like a consistency and coherence. It's also very convenient that the ESV in this entire verse is standing, it's not doing its own particularly sexist or problematic thing. It's standing in a long and deep tradition of interpretive.
Right. Yeah, it's not just the ESV.
No, it is convenient though that, chapter 1, God in Jesus is overcoming every difference and making all things one in him. 2 and 3 like that's particularly about the Jew Gentile fusion hybrid mojo. And in 3, that reveals it to the systems and structures, the same cosmic powers, the same conquerors of the world systems, rulers and authorities in the heavenly places. Like the victory of God is revealed in being a boundary transgressing kinship network, as Willie James Jennings says.
Right.
And then 4, 5, and parts of 6 are like, here's how we enact that. We're talking about earlier about the flow of Ephesians here. There's a deep coherence. Why at the end of it would it be, and by the way, it's about this very arcane, esoteric, invisible, but take my word for it, there are some demons up there doing some dark shit that has been overcome as well. It's like, well, the demons doing dark shit like look like capitalism, look like patriarchy, look like slavery, look like dehumanizing children from their parents.
Right.
And the work of the gospel, the work of the mystery is in overcoming these things. Like this, like your translation discretion here flows out of a very clear set of this worldly victory of God, instead of saying, whoop, it's up there.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything sinister here. Like I kind of insinuated that earlier, but it's certainly to see this evidence and insist at keeping it at the like arcane translation is to that is where it becomes like willful.
Right.
Harm.
Yeah. And I think, like you mentioned, that ESV is not the only perpetrators of this. It's standing in the tradition. Pretty much every widely used English translation is going to be something like what the ESV does here.
Totally, yeah.
And there's a reason for that, and it's because every single widely used English translation is grounding their work in the King James. It's all based on, like, King James set the standard for what we think this stuff is talking about, how we talk about these things in English. And sure, they're willing to like kind of go out on a limb for little pieces here, little pieces there, NIV, ESV, NASB, all these other translation, NRSV. They're willing to go a little bit away from that, enough that they can like highlight something they feel like is really important. But all of them are committed to keeping the same basic cadence, the same basic voice, the same basic perspective as the King James, because otherwise it won't sell. Well, and otherwise it's straying too far from the tradition that we've all inherited.
Yeah, there's a certain family familiarity that comes with these traditions, starting with the KJV.
And none of them want to go against that. Like learning more and more about, I have been, of modern translations and the processes of creating them, and learning, like, I'm actually taking word by word from the Greek into English, doing the best I can. I check with other English translations when something feels kind of confusing, or like I'm trying to figure out what is this, but I'm starting with just the Greek from scratch. And that's not what most of these other versions are doing. They're working from previous, like, NRSV came out this year with the NRSV updated edition. It's not in print yet, but you can see electronically online. And it's just another edition of the NRSV that existed before, which was just an updated version of the RSV, which existed before that. NIV has like the 2018 version or something, like, I don't remember what year, but a recent, before that was the 2001, before that it was the 1984, before that it was the original in 1978, and it's just updating the same work, right? Nobody's doing this from scratch, really, and they're all basing their work on this tradition of what have we received from the King James. And there's a problem with that. And it's not just because King James is over 400 years old now, which is problem enough for a lot of reasons, including that older manuscripts, more reliable manuscripts have been found since then.
And the shitload of English has
Um,
changed. I
and
mean, it's,
English
yeah,
has changed. Yeah. But the problem is part of the history of why the King James exists in the first place. There was already an English translation of the Bible at the time called the Matthew Bible, translated by William Tyndale and somebody Rogers. And they were burned at the stake, martyred for doing that, for creating that Bible, because the withholding, the gatekeeping that was happening at the time of like, no, you can't make the Bible be in any other language other than Latin.
right.
And you dared to change that, so you die. But the problem was King James was a guy, was the king at the time, and he didn't like the Matthew Bible because it was too anti-authoritarian, really.
That's amazing.
And so he banned it, made it illegal to use, and commissioned a group of people to do a new translation that would be more favorable to dictators, basically.
Yeah, perpetuating authoritarian
two
structures.
systems of authoritarian power.
Yep.
And authorized that, and that became the only legal version to use because it supported a tyrant. And that has become the basis for all of our English translations to this point, at least the ones that get widely used.
Wow. And more specifically, it's not just that it supported a tyrant, it's that it neutered as many places as it really could without taking verses out of the Bible, because the Bible is a fundamentally anti-authoritarian handbook for life together. It's a library towards that end.
Yeah, anti-oppression, anti-injustice, or pro-justice.
Yeah, it's pro-humanity. It's a humanistic. It's a very humanistic book. And so, he blunted every sharp edge that could be brought to his dainty skin in this book. It's so I don't know if it supports him, but it certainly is a lot harder to like see that the deep story is counter-authoritarian.
Yeah, well, I think you see maybe in other places where it supports more authoritarian kind of stuff. Here, what it does 13, is it, yeah. Here, what it does is it pulls the teeth out of any attacks against authority, against the power structures, and turns it into like, oh no, it's not about the king, it's about the devil. Right? It's about some disembodied spirit. And so all we can do about that is pray. Yes, pray, do that. But there is more that can actually practically be done to change evil, change oppression, change hardship, change harm that's happening to real people in real life that is faithful. And it's not just, oh, it's only the unseen things that we have no connection with. It's unseen in the sense of it's bigger than one person. You can't take care of the problem by just like killing some guy, even the king. But it involves humans heavily. It's not just in the ether.
Yeah, it's somewhere. Now, I don't want to use between language, but the very first stretch of this verse, for we do not wrestle, because our battle is not against blood and body, but against these offices and
it's talking about human leaders, human authorities, human people who have gotten to the top of the ladder in the world system.
Yep. Yeah, we resist. I mean, that's the challenge, because it is using language of a discrete individual, like leader, authority. Okay, I'm thinking of a mayor, a senator, a president, or whatever. That sure sounds like an individual person. And it just said our battle isn't against blood and body. How do you sort that out?
It's not about taking a sword in this context or a gun in our context and eliminating the threat. It's about the corrupt, oppressive ways that people with power shape the whole system.
Yeah.
And the system itself that we all participate in, all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are actively resist it more than others. Some of us don't realize how we're complicit and co-participants in it.
Yeah. Yep.
You and me, Brandon, like we are beneficiaries of the system in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And that's not something that we can do away with altogether.
Mm-mm.
We can push back some, but in other ways, like we're just going to keep benefiting from it. And our job is to be committed to trying to support those who have a lot less benefit, maybe even more explicit harm from it, and do what we can to support with solidarity. And that might mean actively relinquishing some of our benefit, but some of it we just don't even have that option.
No. Yeah, really, this passage is in a lot of ways about the work of decolonization
Mm-hmm.
as the work of the gospel.
Yeah.
We are recognizing the logic and the stories and the power and the affections and the conveniences of the rulers, authorities, leaders, authorities, and conquerors of the system. The systems and the isms that are internalized in us. That's the complicated thing, is it's so easy to see a physical human and equate them fully with the system that they represent, that they appear to represent, or that they've deeply internalized. We're image-bearing creatures. And so we come to just bear so aggressively a gender binary or capitalism or communism or the police. And I'm a soldier. I'm a police officer, whatever it is, or I'm a man, or I'm a Christian. Like these are all things that we so wrap ourselves in. It's hard for us as individuals to detangle the true self from the false self and to bear the image of the risen one instead of the one of the image of the systems that crucified him.
Right.
And it's hard to see that. Like it's like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure we're our battle is against like Donald Trump. It sure feels like that, but it's like he is expressive of a system, and the wound that is so conspicuous in him is expressed in him tightly robing himself in just horse shit and harm and in fear and in shame.
Yeah. Being the false accuser, or at least
that.
Pushing forward the work of the false accuser.
Yeah.
And being the conqueror, the one who rose to the top of the world system.
Yep. Yeah, by its rules. Well, and beyond.
Yeah. Being characterized by this darkness. I think out of context, we just think like the badness, like darkness. But Ephesians has talked about darkness and being coming to be able to see better and light and earlier on, and it's less than that. It's about not being able to see the mystery that we talked about in chapter 3, the fact that everybody is included, everybody is welcome, that the boundaries of hostility between us need to be broken down.
Yeah, like there's the systems that we robe ourselves in and that we are on our necks at times. They are bent on perpetuating that hostility that Ephesians 3 says God has in Christ overcome, and that we get to enact that, or that was Ephesians 2, 2 and 3. Yeah, that's talking about kind of the same thing from a different angle here. Right. That's a great use of, like, you've got the ESV saying against the cosmic powers over this present darkness. besides that being like a Frank Peretti novel, it's also just
Right.
kind of a cool sounding phrase of like, again, like I've got this Middle Earth feel to it of like the brooding darkness, the deep breath before the plunge. Like I can just
Yeah.
hear over this present darkness in Gandalf voice,
Yeah.
and it's
No,
kind of cool.
it
And
is.
there is something good there. There's something evocative, literarily, and the kind of imagination that we are being called to be formed into by Paul's letter here. Don't miss out on in that it's not just a cool poetic phrase. It's
Hmm.
drawing on, well, darkness was used earlier to mean to in tone a certain set of um, hostilities in this world.
Hmm.
Like the hostilities
Yeah.
and the conquerors of this world system are not unrelated.
Right.
Those
Yeah.
systems depend on perpetuating hostility between us.
Right.
Like as long as Jews and Gentiles are fighting over who's in and who's out, Rome
Hmm.
can keep on stabbing and crucifying them all.
Hmm. Yep.
And it says that Rome's word about what constitutes good civil humanity. What does it mean to participate in the peace coming over all the world? Well, it's on the terms of Rome, and you guys can slap each other all you want, as long as you
Right.
don't look up here.
Hmm.
Or in
Yeah.
our day, that would be blaming Black people or blaming gay people or blaming immigrants
Hmm.
or
Well,
uneducated rural white people.
yeah. Yeah. The divisions between Republicans and Democrats serves the system. Like there is nothing in the system that benefits from us all being on the same side. That's why Russian bots work so hard, not against any one group. It infiltrates all different groups, Bernie supporters and Trump
Yep.
supporters. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I was recently told that something like 19 of the top 20 Christian Facebook sites are all run by Russian bots.
Yep. Yeah, it's insane.
um, like the point of all that is not to push any particular ideology. They're all saying different things, all trying to get people to believe different things. The point is to divide us.
Yeah.
And it works. And then people like Putin or Trump or Elon Musk are the people who benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay, we should acknowledge a little bit here about that. I don't know what color we want to call that. Orangish.
Orangish, yeah.
Speaking of Donald Trump, um, that kind of Trump-colored phrase, "spiritual forces of evil,"
Mm-hmm.
Or in your translation, that are associated with the oppressive spirit breath.
Yeah.
And they're both modified by something about the heavens. What the hell's an oppressive spirit breath? Like, insert morning
Yeah.
breath joke here, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it gets a little clearer maybe if we contrast it with a little bit later on, but the messages, the words, the way we use how we talk, the
Yep.
Bible consistently, it does this in First John, it does this in Matthew, it talks about basically the things that we say, the kinds of ideas that we put into words and share with others, speak against others. It calls those pneuma, spirit, breath,
Yeah.
wind.
Yeah.
Where I've often done pneuma as life breath, talking about God's breath, that we talk about as the Spirit of God or the Holy Spirit or the Spirit of Truth or whatever you look at it different ways. It's kind of modifies a little bit differently.
Sure.
That this is clearly not a life breath here. So when it's when it uses it about breaths, spirit, like the spirit of what is being communicated, in some way, I've been hyphenating spirit breath together.
Cool.
And again, like, I don't think it has to do with another being. It could, maybe we have that much power to like be interacting with these other beings in what we're communicating. Um, but the point of what it's saying here is much more about human interactions. And how the kinds of ideas that we perpetuate in how we talk about things, in how we label people, is oppressive, causes hardship, causes harm. So the word evil there, paneros, is translating it here as oppressive. Sometimes they do hardship, sometimes harm. So similar related ideas like that, because that's really what it means, not just like malicious or something.
Right.
It's not about my quality of I don't even know how to describe what evil usually means.
Yeah.
But it really has to do with my impact on other people.
Yeah, it's almost like that are associated with the oppressive animating energy. Like there is something that comes into or that it's an animating energy. And then it's odd that it then says, well, this is actually, they're in the highest heavens or in the heavenly places, as ESV says. We've spent all this time talking about how it's this worldly, and then it ends with that. What do you do?
Yeah, well, we talked about, I think it might have been all the way back in chapter 1 in Ephesians. We talked about the phrase the highest heavens. So Paul uses this like stratosphere, like stratiated, what's the word? I don't know. Lots of levels of like the heavens, all the way from like the ground, and then the air is like the part of the atmosphere that we breathe, and then there's the heavens, and then there's the epuranois, the part that's over or on the heavens, so the highest heavens. It's these levels basically of power, of influence, of authority, of status. And so just like regular everyday people live on the ground, and then you have like local officials maybe that are in the air, and then you have people like Caesar or Trump and Elon Musk that are in the highest heavens, and they have the most power. And of course, we would think of Jesus as being, it talks about Jesus being seated at the right hand of the Father in the highest heavens. And that's who the point is that we're trying to build a world where that's who we all see as being the authority, the leader, to have in that spot in the highest heavens for everyone everywhere, because it leads towards unity and care and love between everybody. And so this what it's talking about here is kind of imposters or people, usurpers, who are taking that place through force when it doesn't belong to them.
Well, I think we need to move along to the next verse. And with that, I am going to get, we have 10 minutes left on this call, so let's hang up. I need to use the bathroom, and then I'll come back down and we'll get it set up for the final stretch.
Cool.
Great. Bye.
Bye.
All right, there we go. So this is the part where we talk about the thing every men's group just has such a joy about. Putting on the armor of frickin' God.
Oh yeah. And I remember being a teenager and like drawing the soldier with all the pieces on it stuff too, and having like this like flaming sword be the sword of the spirit.
There's a few helpful distinctions here. In 14, you've got justice instead of righteousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which we've talked about some of the difference there, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Then triumphant message of peace versus gospel of peace. That's really just another instance of you removing religious technical language and
Yeah.
emphasizing the like victory nature of the gospel.
Yeah. And this is like, it's already inherent in just triumphant message or evangelion anyway, but the of
Yes.
peace here I think really emphasizes like this is different than the way that Caesar does, like the Pax Romana, the we're going to achieve peace by just obliterating all dissent.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and that's just the opposite of what the triumphant message of peace that Jesus teaches us does,
Yes.
how what he lives out.
Yeah. And then we've got while wearing it with all of it, the shield faithfulness instead of
Mm-hmm.
faith.
Yep, that one we could talk about for a while, but we've just talked about this word so much.
We have.
It's one that I get a little riled up about.
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, that trusting faithfulness,
Allegiance.
commitment, allegiance, all of that, that orienting toward commitment to the way of Christ because I trust that it's genuinely good, that it's beneficial, that it's true. All of that helps protect from, be shielded from anything that's going to like try to erode that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's a better, it's a more faithful word here to do faithfulness
I
or
see what you
trust or
did there.
allegiance
Yeah.
than faith. But this is also an occasion to, as we say often here, it's also faith has become a religious technical word. So
Mm-hmm.
when this is read, it's the shield is how hard I believe in God, like some sort of cognitive assent, or like
Right.
how fear, like I'm my cynical wounds from my experience in Pentecostalism surfacing here of like, how tight can I squeeze my eyes when I pray and say it loudly and with enough
Yeah.
that's not what's being talked about here, is like how strongly you believe in God existing or
Right.
anything. It's
How good are you at just turning down the volume on your cognitive dissonance?
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All my sputtering, that was exactly
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And then next one, oppression versus uh, extinguish all the flaming arrows of oppression. I love it. It's not
Yeah.
just the evil one. It's, well, we've been talking about how all the like celestial realities take on flesh as well, and that flesh puts a boot on, and it puts that boot on people's necks.
Mm-hmm.
Why not lean into that? And then in the next verse, you've got the helmet isn't salvation, it's liberation.
Mm-hmm. Which is a type of salvation.
It
So
is.
to be fair, salvation isn't incorrect. It's
No.
just we've been trained to hear it in a very particularly, very disembodied
Saved from your
way,
sins, not going to
like the
hell.
cosmic powers kind of thing, rather than
Yeah.
something that's active and present in the world around us right here.
Yeah, its primary tense or sense is material, and there's within liberation there's plenty of space to also understand the more invisible sense of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one here is, in the short sword, the life breath, which comes from the mouth of God.
Mm-hmm.
I found there to be some nice surprises here.
Yeah, what stood out there for you?
Let's see. You said it comes from the mouth of God. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's usually the word, right? That's often the
Right, yeah.
translation.
Right, yeah. The word for from which comes from the mouth there is one word in the Greek. It's rhema, not logos. And so we tend to think of the word of God as being
The Bible.
the Bible or maybe Jesus. And logos has that sense of it's the conversation, the communication that God is engaging with humanity through scripture, through Jesus, through the prophets, through creation, through nature, like all these ways. And that fits really well with logos. The word here, that's not the word here. And I think it just really helps to make that clear in some ways, because we just lean on, make it a technical term of the Bible, the 66 books we have printed on my desk, and nothing else.
Yes.
And so the word rhema here is literally like utterance, or just like, it could be a sound. It's just anything that comes vocally, really out of a mouth.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
Which is similar to what logos means, but it's like logos has more of a conversational, a discussion feel to it, whereas rhema is much more just like the thing that someone said. You
know? For those who are geeky about other parts of the Bible, the image at the end of Revelation, which is conventionally the last book in the New Testament, is one of Christ overcoming all the bullshit, and a sword comes out of his mouth, which I believe is truth. Is that right?
Probably. That sounds
There's
right.
a sword coming out of his mouth, and I didn't know that image is anywhere else in the Bible. I thought it was just in that esoteric, apocalyptic code language, myth language in Revelation. And here it is right here. The short sword is the Spirit of God, the animating divinity coming out of the mouth of God, the breath coming out of the mouth. Who'd have thought? Like, so you get more coherent metaphor and imagery here, as well as accidental or happy coincidence resonance with Revelation. Love it.
Yeah.
Last thing is, let's see. In verse 19 and 20, that what to say may be given to me when I open my mouth, along with courage to speak and make known the mystery of the triumphant message, which is why I'm an ambassador in chains, that I may have courage to speak it as necessary to speak about it. I am just really happy to see the mystery showing up here at the end after it's been such an important conversation partner throughout Ephesians.
Yeah.
See, it shows up not just in 3, but in 6. It's at the halfway point and then the finale.
Right. Yeah. And like, as we've defined, the mystery isn't just whatever we don't understand about spirituality or about God or whatever. It's pretty specific. It's that God has always intended to branch out and reach out to all people, all creation, bring down the barriers, include everyone. Yes. That is what the mystery is. And we just, humanity being we, have struggled to see it, even though it's been there the whole time, all the way from Genesis, from creation 1 and 2, from Abraham and the promise to bless all nations. It's been there from the beginning. I think in chapter 3 it says since ages past. But
to create this technicolor belonging that, and that's why he's in chains. It's not because he said you all broke the rules and God did something so that you're able to keep, come out of time out again.
People don't want to hear it.
He's saying God has overcome your instincts to put other people in time out, whether that's gay people or go on down the list of all the people that we like to keep in time out.
Yeah. The people that we see as other, and we make ourselves feel better, give ourselves more power by pushing them down.
I can imagine being put in chains for suggesting that systems of control don't have the final say.
People with control fight real hard to keep it.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm going to have to control the end point on this episode, which is now. So thanks everybody for listening. This has been wonderful to go through Ephesians with you. The easiest way to support Found in Translation is to leave us a rating or review here on Facebook or YouTube or in the podcast player you're listening in. Makes it easier for more people to find the show and get in on this stuff. Second best way to support this show is to become a sponsor for just $5 a month. When you do that, you get comment access on the Translations Google Doc and the satisfaction that you are supporting exceptionally nerdy independent media. There's a link to join that community in the show notes. The music you're listening to is by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Found in Translation was produced on by Perry FM on unceded Chinook land. Goodbye, Brandon.
Bye, Brandon.
Bye, everybody.